Hello, all right, and welcome everybody. So, this is the first part of a 4 or 5 part series here to introduce you to your final project. So, just to make sure that we're all familiar, we're going to be using the timeline down here at the bottom. And the main process that we're going to go for here is that your assignment has to be 20 seconds long. Now, at the bottom in your timeline, remember that that's based off of frames. So that's 24 frames per second. So if you do a little bit of math, 24 frames per second at 20 seconds, we want 480 frames total. So I'm going to change that down here in the bottom corner. We're going to change that up like that. So if we're doing 240, that would only be 12 frames a second, or half the speed. I want to encourage you, if you feel that 480 is too much, I'd rather you only do half the animation, but have it be very stellar, excellent work. I'd rather have half very well done than a whole that is kind of poorly done. Okay? All right, so that being said, we've got a couple things on our screen, of course. I just opened up the Norman model, the same model that we've used before in the past. So there's our figure. Of course, we have our camera, and then there's also 2 light sources. So for right now, for this first part of the assignment, we don't really need to think about the camera or the lighting at all. We are only thinking about moving and animating this character. So over here in the top right-hand corner, I'm going to go ahead and find my light sources and my camera. And I'm just going to turn the little eyeball here to make sure that those go invisible so that I don't have to see them. And that way I can mainly focus on just Norman and just moving his body and from pose to pose within the animation. So let's see. Excuse me. Let's grab the figure here. And I'm going to go ahead and just close that off. So all of our information that we need is kind of in this window. I'm going to grab the camera. Hit the little eyeball. There we go. And like I said, you can click on that. It's still there. It's just going invisible. So I'll do the same with the lights, and we're back in action. Okay. Now, I've got Norman the figure. We have posed him before for previous assignments, of course. But what we're going to be doing is basically for this first part, what you're turning into me for the very first part of this assignment is I want to see one new pose every 24 frames per second, or every 24 frames. Now, if it's not exactly 24 frames, that's okay. So I'm going to mainly work with this disc here at the bottom. That's going to move him entirely. Different animators work different ways. You may choose to work pose to pose, so every single pose you change him, right? You may work where you only animate one limb at a time, right? So I would move just his right leg throughout the entire 480 animation or 480 frames animation. Doesn't matter which direction you go or which preference you have, but like I said, let's jump in. So what we're looking for, what I'm imagining for my animation, and yours can be anything you want. We've got a start point. I'm going to have him jump once, jump a second time, and then maybe I'm going to have him I want him to do something different. He's going to jump up in the air and kind of go like, hooray, or do, I don't know, something. All right, so he does something on the third jump, and then he kind of rolls out of that, and we'll say he gives like the thumbs up. He says, hey, I made it, hooray, and he little thumbs up there. Okay, so that's going to be the breakdown of my animation, all right? You don't have to use this annotate option. This is just so you can visually see what I'm coming up with. What you choose to animate is completely up to you. So I want to kind of ahead of time think about where are these elements going to happen, right? When does he jump here? When does he jump there? When does he jump up and say hip hip hooray? And when does he do his thumbs up? So if I break that down, remember we have 480 frames to work with. So let's see. I have to take into account kind of the height and the low end. So let's say he does 400 at frame 400, he'll do the thumbs up. Frame 300, he'll do the hip hip hooray. 200 it is his second jump, and 100 it is his first jump. So that at least gives me something to work out of. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make sure, again, I want to kind of visualize here. So he does his first jump, his second jump, his little hip hip hooray, that's at frame 300, and then he does a little something, and that's frame 400. Okay, so kind of rough and crude movement here, but that's all right. Okay, now I want to start off by only moving that disc that he's standing on, and that will move his entire person. And that way I can really tell if the pacing and the timing is working out okay. So make sure that you have your keyframes turned on. It's that little white circle, right? And move your timeline And so in my case, at frame 100, he should be here. At frame 200, about there maybe. It looks pretty good. About 300, we want him to be, let's move him up, because he's going to jump up, and then he's going to land and do a little something, a little flippy dippy. So let's move him right about here. That looks pretty good. That's good, yeah. But I want him in the air at frame 300, right? So right about here, not too high up, okay? By frame 400, he has come down from his jump, his little hip hip hooray. He's landed on the ground. Maybe he's a little bit forward because he's jumping in an arc. And then he's going to do his thumbs up by the very tail end. So we'll say by frame, I don't know, whatever, 450-ish, we'll say he's a little bit further ahead and he's doing a thumbs up. Okay, so let's just check that movement. So it goes from 1 to 200, 300, 400, and back down. And it's in-betweening the entire time for us, which makes things kind of easy. Okay, how about at frame 50, if he's jumping, right? Frame 50, he should be in the air. So let's go ahead and just kind of find that somewhere in the middle there. And I want to move him straight up. And this is going to be a big high jump, so he kind of goes up and back down. And then same thing here, he's going to do a second jump right about here. So let's say I want it maybe like half the height. So if he's up this high, then by the time he hits frame 150, he should only be up maybe that high. So he started up high, and now he's kind of coming down low. Okay, so it kind of goes up and down, up, down, and does his little hip hip hooray, and he lands. Okay, so just like you're doing for your animation, however you choose to do it, you want to position him and make sure that that timing and pacing is good. So now that we know that's good, I'm going to go way back to frame 0. I'm going to pose his figure, or pose this figure here, in just kind of a casual standing position. This is going to be the very first pose of the animation. So take your time, move each and every little joint that you want to. Remember how we posed him for our previous assignments, and take your time. Find the pose that works best for you. I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing, only for mine, I'm going to speed it up so that this video isn't very long. So let's go ahead and we'll start with my pose. Here we go. All right, so here's my first pose. He's kind of casual, his hip is kind of banking to the side there. He's kind of got his weight over top of his one leg. Okay, so this is a nice kind of casual first pose. Now remember that for the first part of this animation project, right, you are only working on setting one pose every 24 seconds. I'm not worried about in-betweens. I'm not worried about props or background or lighting or anything like that. But notice, right there, notice that when I've set that pose, it is just moving that single pose like a statue, moving it throughout the entire animation. Well, we want to tell the computer by this second round here, by frame 50, it should be doing something completely different, right? Those movements, almost like moving a puppet, those movements should be pretty different. So let's do that. All right, okay, so I've made a second pose now, this time at frame 50. Remember that we're making one frame every 24 seconds. So between frame 50, frame 0 and frame 50, he moves upwards, but then he also changes his pose, right? The animation, Blender is doing the in-betweens. It's moving the character. It's just going from one pose to another, right? You want to make sure, because this is a three-dimensional object, make sure you're looking at it from different angles and that you're happy with that pose. But the big thing to remember that as you're going along and doing each one of these different poses is to go back again and make sure that something isn't necessarily out of place. It can happen sometimes. You can get a thing called a pop, where you go from one keyframe to another keyframe and the pose kind of wiggles or the elbow goes in a funny direction. You always want to make sure that you're kind of backtracking and making sure that everything has a good flow before you totally wrap everything up, right? So let's do one more pose. This time I'm going to just change frame 0 real quick, and then I'm going to go ahead and add a new frame for frame 24. Okay. All right. So I now have 3 new poses. One at frame 0, One at, well, it's supposed to be frame 24, but I actually pushed it to frame 33, and then one at frame 50. So if yours aren't exactly at every 24 frames, that's okay. I actually pushed mine to frame 33 because I felt like timing-wise, he should be kind of crouched down a little bit later on. But there's a pop, look right there. Look at how his feet are all crazy now, right? Going from frame 33 to frame 50, the computer got confused because it's only trying to track these poses and it gets confused. The movement looks good, the pacing, the timing looks good, but something happened along the way where his feet, look at this, watch, ready? Goes down, okay, up, and then, whoa, his knee kind of flies through his chest there. Okay, that's a problem, right? Okay, so we need to change that real quick. So let's do that, okay. So I'm just going to go in here. I'm at frame 50 now because I know that that's where something went wrong. I'm going to grab those feet with those little red boxes and let's move that down a little bit. So maybe, you know, he's pushing off the ground. Maybe his feet are a little more in front of him. This right leg here has got some troubles. Let's move that forward, maybe even a little bit further down. So he's like pushing off the ground with that leg. Look at here. Yep. Got to look at it from multiple directions. Make sure the knee's in the right place. That foot's in the right place. Look, it's way over to the left. Let's move that. Okay. All right, that's a little bit stronger pose. Looks good. And so again, this is what I mean by setting your poses, but instead of just running through and doing every 24 frames, back to back to back to back, do one and then rewind a little bit, play it out, make sure that it works. Do the next one, rewind a little bit, move it a little bit, and kind of nudge it here and there to make sure that it's as smooth as it possibly can be. Hopefully that makes sense. Obviously, if it doesn't, you can always reach out to me or any of your teachers, and we are more than happy to help you along the way. So let's check it out. Down, up. Okay, cool. All right, that looks much smoother than before. I've got 3 frames down. 1, 2, 3. Cool. So the next one I'll do, if I just finished one up at frame 50, then I'll do one at frame 75, frame 100, and so on. So every 24, 25 frames, you should have a whole bunch of keyframes. When you're done, you can save this as a video, or you can simply send in the Blender file. All the best, guys. See you soon.